Case number APCW-2018-693-SPE-SPP-CDP-CUB, environmental case ENV 2018-694-CE. I move to adopt the staff recommendations, including the categorical exemption prepared for the project, the findings, and the conditions of approval.
Commissioner Margulies, I would second that.
James Williams, City Planning. We have a motion and a second on the table. Commissioner Waltz Morocco.
Aye.
Commissioner Margulies.
Aye.
Commissioner Roseman.
Nay.
Commissioner Newhouse.
Nay.
That motion also fails.
I know.
Well, let's work on number 3.
Number 3.
It sounds like number 3 is a sticking point, so let's walk over it. See if I can improve. Maybe I can, maybe I can't.
What makes this particular? Excuse me, Commissioner Waltz Morocco. Number 3 specifically talks about this particular property. So, go ahead, you're being.
Hold on just a second. And I'll share it with everybody else. The suggestion has been made. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I really had a terrible cough. For like a week. I'm okay. The suggestion has been made, and I'm actually sort of from a commissioner exercise point enjoying this back and forth a little bit. We rarely get into this. We have a lot of unanimous decisions on this commission. This is actually sort of interesting from a standpoint. What was just suggested to me is that certainly next meeting we will have all 5 commissioners. Commissioner Yellen will be here, and one way or another this tie will get broken. I'm a little reticent to do that. We spent a lot of time on it already here today. I don't know how the rest of the commissioners feel. We spent a lot of time today. We would have to hear it again next time, obviously. We couldn't just go straight to this step. Everybody's come out. It's late. We've spent a lot of time. Unless somebody feels strongly we should do that, I'm sort of reticent to do that. I'll take another crack at number 3 here, and we'll see where we come out. If we can't come out somewhere, well then maybe we have to hear it again when Commissioner Yellen is here, because we don't have a failure to act provision here is the problem. It's just literally nothing will happen. We may need Commissioner Yellen to be here. So I'll give a final stab at it. Let's work through it a little bit and see if we agree. So the language here on condition 3, the requested exemption, let me do it in the affirmative so it's clear. The requested exemption is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right. I do think that it is necessary. Necessary can mean a lot of things. I think necessary can and should in certain circumstances not mean that it is. Let's put it this way. Does necessary mean that if we don't grant this exemption, the business goes out of business? No, it doesn't mean that. So in the most strict definition of the word, it might not be necessary. But let's look at the whole sentence. Necessary for the preservation and enjoyment. And enjoyment of a substantial property right, not an absolute property right, not a right to keep your business or to have your business fail, a substantial property right or use generally possessed by other property within the geographic.
Other property.
Exactly. Now, if we look at other property, how does other property deal with this? It gets dealt with in a lot of different ways, but oftentimes other properties, because there will be a larger parking requirement, are able to offset that on the 30% rule with parking. Here we have such a small sample, I would argue that it's unfair to hold this property to that same level. If we had 90 spaces like we did last month, they were asking reconsideration on it. I'm blanking on the... Wilshire, thank you. That's a little different. We're dealing with 120 parking spaces or something like that. Here, they're almost being biased because they're so close. This is clearly an establishment that doesn't need 3 parking spaces. Doesn't need it for its patrons, doesn't need it for its workers, doesn't need it for its clientele, but it's being punished because it can't apply an offset to its parking requirement on bike because it's such a small amount of parking spaces.
Because of the 30% rule.
Because of the 30% rule, but what I would say is that the requested exception is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of that substantial property right that they have that is being impinged upon because of a rare issue with them only having 3 spaces. See, or use generally possessed by other property. Generally, you have a much larger parking requirement. And so they generally have the right to use this offset with bikes. We do it all the time.
No
But
patio, no parking.
Excuse me, this is the last warning. You are out of order. You do not have the floor. If you do it again, I'm reluctantly going to have to ask you to leave, Margaret. Please. You're out of order. You've spoken. You've had your time. Okay?
Mike.
So, let me just finish. Let's walk through this and then we can all talk about what I'm saying. I think that, again, it is generally possessed by other properties. It is not possessed by them because we're only dealing with 3 parking spaces. It is certainly within the geographically specific plan in the same zone and vicinity, but which, because of such special circumstances and practical difficulties, again, a requirement of only 3, that there's no real practical way to satisfy even partially through bikes. I think that is a special circumstance or practical difficulty, and it does create an unnecessary hardship that is being denied to the property in question. I think if we link into the fact that this 3 parking requirement is what's causing the problems, not the heart of the specific plan itself, then I think it's amply supported that it's not, that the requested exception is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of that substantial property right. They are being hurt by the fact that there are only 3 spaces there.
And this is Commissioner Margulies. Okay, I love the glass half empty, half full argument here. I could make the opposite argument to say they're doubling their floor space. They're taking over another restaurant. They're doubling their business. They're only being asked to provide facilities for 3 parking spaces. 3! If they were anywhere else and they were trying to get as much floor space, I mean, there would be a lot more parking required. And we're in a beach impact zone. I mean, there are special requirements in the specific plan area that apply to this property, that apply to all properties.
It's, with all due respect, it's a false equivalent. They are taking square footage that was previously used by a restaurant right next door, which already had enough parking, clearly under the code, and was turning out way more customers and food product per hour. You had people coming in and out of Subway 30, 40, 50 an hour. You don't have that turnover at Great White. This pickup of the square footage that was Subway's already and is being used in much higher volume is lower volume, is going to require much less trips by patrons to the establishment. You're going to need less parking by definition. Quite frankly, if you take into account of the volume that Subway is doing versus their parking, we're actually adding parking, if you really think of it that way, because they're doing so many less customers. It's a sit-down restaurant, or maybe, it's true. I mean, think about it. Subway turns over sandwiches. They've made a name on it. They'll turn over your sandwich in 2 minutes. You've got 50 people coming in an hour. 50 people an hour don't come into Great White. There is less demand on parking spaces because Great White took over that space. This is textbook. The more I think about it, thank you for bringing it up, because I think it makes the record stronger. This is absolutely necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of this substantial property right, because it is a special circumstance. It is a practical difficulty, because we're talking about making them add 3 spaces where they're going to be serving probably a quarter of the customers.
I want to ask the city something. If a different lessee came and took over the Subway store and came to us asking for a CDP for that, well, how would we evaluate the parking?
This is Julietta with City Planning. So just to be clear about the scope of work and what's requiring the parking, you have a structure that has multiple tenants and 0 required parking for the structure itself and the existing uses. There's no change of use being proposed, so really we're talking about the new component to the project, and that's the service area that's going to be on city property. So we're not talking about the Subway restaurant or the existing operations the Great White has. We're talking about their new patio space and how much additional parking is going to be required by that. The Subway space is today required to provide 0 parking. That's on their CFO. They have no parking requirement. It's a restaurant use, and so to merge it with the existing Great White restaurant is interior improvements.
Commissioner Margulies, you're killing me. I mean, because I think the success of this operation, like part of what really makes it beneficial to the community is its operations, where it really opens into the open space. If we said, okay, well, no, like you can't have any outdoor seating, then, you know, just like egg sled across the street where you can't see what's going on unless people are in line, and, you know, it definitely is not a benefit to the community, so.
Right. I mean, every way we slice it, this is, I mean, we have the grounds. I just laid them all out. We have the grounds. Absolutely. And again, it's not prejudicing anybody. It's not hurting anybody. It's not, and we have legitimate grounds. I just spent a half hour laying them out. And trust me, I have no interest. Ms. Malloy, literally, I've known you a long time. I don't want to do it. If you have another outburst, I'm just going to have to ask you to leave. I'm sorry. Please, be respectful of other people's times and opinions. We've heard your opinion. We're clear how you feel on it. We get it. We understand how you feel. Okay? A couple of people up here agree with you. Right? Having said all that, I would really like to renew my motion again. We have it on the record. I'm not going to read it all back in again. You know me, I don't normally take stands like this on stuff like this. And this is a minor little thing.
I know, you usually do not.
This isn't some big, massive project in
I
Venice
understand.
that I even know the people who are running. I just really think this is an important point here, and I think we can actually do something that makes some sense.
Well, okay.
I see Julia.
Julia, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Before you make any motion, I do want to clarify that if you are making a motion to grant the exception, you do want to modify some of these conditions. Because right now there is a condition that requires the 3 parking spaces. So you would want to remove that.
Right.
And then.
Well, and then we have to add in the bike spaces.
Right, whatever additional parking or bike parking you want to add. And the other thing is typically, you know, if the commission is leaning towards granting the exception, we don't want to focus on financial hardship. That's not necessarily something we consider. So we really want to speak to site constraints. The property is built out, there's no room, things like that.
Right, and to be clear, the financial, if it was even mentioned by me, it certainly wasn't. You know, it certainly wasn't germane to the discussion here. I'm going to do this because we're short on time. I think all of my reasons are out there, and I'm going to incorporate them back into a motion again. What I will add to it is that the